Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, October 17. I'm Juliet Bennett here with John Weigell, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Drive-in theaters went from accounting for 85% of U.S. box office revenue during the pandemic to being a nostalgic curiosity with only 283 locations nationwide today. What started in 1933 as a solution for families with noisy kids has survived everything from the shift to smaller cars in the 70s to the VHS revolution. So, is it profitable now in 2025? We'll get to that and the biggest business and tech news right after this. Scouting America, previously known as the Boy Scouts, has 2 new merit badges Scouts can earn: AI and cybersecurity. Air Force Officer Michael Dunn, who worked with Scouting America on the cybersecurity badge, said that it not only helps Scouts protect themselves from digital threats, but introduces them to an industry with ample openings. And if you have questions about either badge, you could ask Scoutly. That's the organization's new chatbot. Santa is making a list and also checking his resume twice. This year's holiday job hunt is looking bleak, according to a report from Indeed. More people are searching early for seasonal work, but fewer employers are hiring. This year's retail holiday hiring might sink to its lowest level since 2009, according to data from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. To blame on the naughty list? Automation, tariffs, inflation. Usual suspects here. Pennies are getting harder to come by after the U.S. Treasury wound down production earlier this year, leaving retailers in a bind. A consortium of retail groups is asking Congress for legislation to make it easier to give exact change, warning that low-income customers could be hit the hardest. Some chains, like Quick Trip, are rounding cash transactions down to the nearest nickel, while others are nudging shoppers toward credit cards. Nestle, the world's largest food company, said it will eliminate about 16,000 global jobs over the next 2 years. The bulk of the layoffs will impact white-collar positions as the company automates more processes with AI. And finally, Steve Jobs will appear on the U.S. Mint's $1 innovation coin, which it's issued annually since 2018, to honor the pioneering efforts of individuals or groups from different states. Jobs obviously represents California, while other 2026 honorees include the Cray 1 supercomputer, which apparently represents Wisconsin. And for more stuff like that, subscribe to the show, and we'll have more for you tomorrow.
Okay, so Juliet, today you and I are diving into the world of drive-in movie theaters. Obviously, they were big during the pandemic. They had a bit of a resurgence. Can you just tell me a bit about their 2020 resurgence and how that kind of netted out for them right now?
Oh, yeah. 2020 was a big time for the drive-in movie theater. From late March to mid-August of 2020, which was, of course, peak pandemic times, drive-ins actually accounted for 85% of U.S. box office revenue, which, by comparison, in 2019, they accounted for 2.9%. So a huge jump.
Wow.
Obviously, that was caused by something pretty specific, which was we actually could not go to any other type of movie theater. So that was all you got.
Right.
And, there was very little to do other than sit in your house or go to work if you were somebody that still went to work during that time.
Of course.
So it is very obvious why the drive-in theater was a big deal.
So I'm interested in this because I feel like, of course, it makes a lot of sense that a drive-in theater would have done really well in the 2020 time period during peak pandemic when the theaters were actually also closed and you couldn't really go in anyways. But for the years before then, too, I wonder how they just lost their popularity because Nickelodeon's old theaters were also a thing. And yet drive-in theaters were very happily attended by consumers at one point.
Yeah, so a little history on the drive-in. So they date back to the 1910s, but the first one, according to the New York Film Academy, was patented by a guy named Richard Hollingshead in New Jersey in 1933. And it was kind of to solve an interesting problem. His mother could not comfortably fit in a traditional movie theater seat, so he wanted to offer a movie-going experience for her and people like her that was more comfortable. Also, it allowed families to come. Now, if you're in a movie theater and you bring your 8-year-old and your 8-year-old won't stop talking, like everybody's going to be like, hey, shh, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you are in your own car, that's your problem and no one cares.
Yeah, right. You've contained your 8-year-old in the vehicle.
So, it just offered a way for people who weren't comfortable in traditional movie theaters for whatever reason to have a new way to view them that may be, more beneficial for them. Of course, this achieved peak popularity in the 50s and 60s. If you, watch a lot of retro movies, you'll of course see a drive-in experience, date nights, whatever. And at their peak in 1958, they had over 4,000 locations across the United States. Then the 1970s came along and consumers started purchasing smaller cars because they wanted to spend less money on gas. And so the format of the drive-in movie theater changed. So instead of appealing to the whole family that's piling in the big station wagon or whatever, now they're showing late night films. So this is like your horror movies, your exploitation films, maybe some adult content that you don't want kids to see.
Gotcha.
Obviously, your screen would have to be kind of set back, to show some of these things, but it became like this late night, midnight movie kind of thing. And then something happened. It was called the VHS.
Yes.
And people were like, well, I can just do this at my house. What's more comfortable than my house? I'm going to do that. And that sort of started crushing the drive-in movie theater. And then, of course, when everything switched from film to digital, that was a big expense to make that conversion. And some theaters just simply could not. There have been some attempts pre-pandemic to bring the drive-in back. I found this thing where Johnny Rockets, which of course is like this retro burgers, fries, a very Americana diner.
Yeah.
They said they were going to open 200 theaters by 2018. For some reason, that never happened. Like I found a lot of press releases about it, but it never manifested. And so in 2024, there were about 283 drive-ins left across the U.S. If you think about Johnny Rockets saying they were going to open 200 and they never did, and there's only 200, like that would have been twice as many, that would have been a lot of drive-thrus compared to the 283 that we have today.
It's kind of a shame that they didn't make that investment because if they finished that project by 2018, maybe they would have had a year or two of struggling, but 2020 would have rolled around and they would have just immediately hopped on that.
Oh my God, they would have made
It would have been like Zoom around that time or something. So it's kind of unfortunate that they did do that as a fan of personally of the Johnny Rockets gimmick. But now what's kind of the situation? Because a lot of the theaters were planning to open a bunch of theaters. They didn't. And the drive-in theater got a big resurgence 5 years ago. Have they been able to kind of like keep the tide going into the 2020s?
So I read a couple interesting things. So there was a big piece in CNN about like, are the drive-ins here to stay? And, it seems kind of hit or miss. Like there are drive-ins that are still operational today. A lot of them are independently operated. So you're not seeing like the AMC of drive-ins necessarily. There are a lot of people who love the drive-in. They want to reopen a shuttered drive-in as a labor of love. The appeal here is that the drive-in typically offers cheaper tickets than our traditional theaters. And much like most things, they rely on concessions to stay afloat. But people still go. They find them accessible. There's a really great photo essay I also looked at in the New York Times where a photographer, Janie Osborne, visited 3 theaters near where she lives. She went to one in Montana, one in Wyoming, one in Idaho, and she found a lot of audiences across all demographics who actually really just enjoy going to the drive-thru because it's accessible. And one cool thing is some of them didn't even drive. They rode their bike there or they walked there and just put a blanket on the ground.
Right.
And another thing that they have, there are a lot of movie theaters that do repertory screenings or 20th anniversary screenings.
Sure.
But the drive-ins can really capture that nostalgia thing. They can show an older movie, but they're also showing it in this very nostalgic format. So if people want to go see some retro thing from the 60s or 70s, they may choose to go to the drive-thru because it's a whole experience.
Right. That is an angle that they have an advantage in as opposed to like a regular theater. Because I know like the Alamo Drafthouse, for example, does like nostalgic screenings of like older movies and whatnot. And you could buy a ticket, you get like maybe 3 movies for the day or something of like nostalgic screenings. But yeah, the drive-in, it is the whole experience that brings it around, which is really nice comparatively and kind of puts you back in that 1980s, 1970s mindset. So yeah, pretty cool. I'm glad they're still around. And even though there are about only 283 of them, they seem to be doing quite decently, even in spite of being 5 years removed from the pandemic, probably because of this nostalgia play.
Yeah, a lot of it is a labor and love. I don't think you're ever going to become super wealthy off of, operating a drive-in unless you have a whole lot of them. But if you can keep people coming and get the audiences in and make money off of concessions, I think offering interesting concessions helps, having good popcorn that people want to pay for, interesting snacks, interesting candies. Like, I think that really helps. I've also seen a few spins on the drive-in that I enjoy. Here in LA, I've seen a couple boat-in options where they'll have a projector over a lake.
It's pretty cool.
Where they have the swan paddle boats and people can get on those, and then they have the projector like over the lake.
Wow.
Also, so Swimply, which is kind of like the Airbnb and pools, you have a pool, you can rent it out to people. They partnered with Disney Plus. And I saw they were doing these immersive screenings in the pool. So you could watch Alien, but you're like sitting in a pool.
That's pretty cool.
Or around a pool.
Wow. Okay.
And so I like those a lot. I mean, in LA, one of our biggest film events is Cinespio, which happens in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And you go and like put your blanket on the ground in the cemetery and, take a picnic or whatever. So I think there's a lot of different options for these types of screenings. They don't have to be drive-ins, but it's nice to see that they're still around.
Yeah. The creativity still exists around them. And that's really exciting, I think, for the movie industry.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for tuning in to the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the Hubspot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clarke. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter, so if you're not subscribed, go get yourself signed up at thehustle.co/email, and we will see you next week.